do we think, guys? Amanda? Yes?
I think maybe the administrator wants to know your time management, maybe things you do that's other than something routine, because like eating dinner is something that everybody does. So I don't think they'll be interested.
Exactly, right? So instead, Kevin, what do you think? What, let's say, potentially might be another way of framing your answer to be more specific and interesting at the same time?
Like, you should put more emphasis on the things you really enjoy doing, and also the more important aspects of your life. For example, you should omit all the parts like doing homework or eating breakfast. And
I woke up at this time, and then I do this, and then I do that. So this first, and then. Yes, go ahead.
I think you should, I guess, put more emphasis on the things you really enjoy doing. For example, when you wake up, let's say you read for 15 minutes, and you've been doing that for a long time, you should tell them things like that, things that are special to you.
Right, so things that are more or less meaningful in a way. And Harper, is that a hand up? Do you want something to add on to it?
I think when you answer these types of questions, you should be like positive and never put like things you don't like too long, because they want to see like how you express things and not like, I hate this and I hate this thing that I do every day, but my mom forces me to, so I do it. And spend all their time saying that.
Right. But let's say, everyone, this is getting interesting, and so both, right? Everybody, Amanda, Kevin, and Harper had done a very good job in decoding that question now. So I'm just going to put down, right, the second objective in our class is to understand how to decode the underlying, all right, meaning behind each question. Right, so why are they asking the question like that? It seems a bit personal, but we need to understand it's never their purpose to dig out your privacy. All right, everyone. So it's not like that they want to know every single bit and how exactly, like as if they're like they put a surveillance on your life. It's not like that. They just want to know a little bit more about your personality, right? Your hobbies, and more importantly, your values. All right. And we need to understand how to show them in a rather subtle way instead of just tell them, be kind, nice, and helpful are my core values. What would potentially go wrong with answers like that? Am I not being honest? What's wrong with the answers, right? Like that. My core values are to be helpful, to be nice, and to be kind to everybody around me.
They're basically the same thing, and you're just repeating yourself.
Yeah. Sort of. Okay. And to say it in such a blunt way, what are the negative implications attached to that, William?
It shows that you're like nervous, and
yeah, go ahead.
It shows that you're nervous and that you don't even know what you are personally.
Sort of. Very good. Jackie?
Blandness might implicate dishonesty.
Yes, Jackie. So do you think that is, a very flexible reaction, or is rather stiff? It shows kind of, it's very anxious, or kind of, once again, cut the conversation short. Okay? And we need to understand with each of those keywords, you could elaborate, right, on more. Okay. All right. So, because we need to practice, right, and a lot of those things are better absorbed, right, when we're here and then we're interactive with one another. So, but the objective, those two main things, right, and this is how we are going to make sure, right, we get very familiarized with, and we can now revisit some of those questions back. And Kevin, with that hand up, is this something that you want to say?
So for the one where you said the nice and also kind thing, I think that the administrators, they're not looking for necessarily people who are nice, because there are a lot of people that are nice, and they're not admitting you into the school because you're nice. They want to admit you into the school because they think you're capable, you're talented, and also I think that it's very vague. It doesn't show that you're nice or kind to anyone. You need to show examples of why you think you're nice to people. And you help people do, let's say, I don't know, a project or something, not tell them bluntly. So I think that you should elaborate more instead of just telling them.
Very good. So that is exactly what we're looking for. So to say something bluntly, if you're being 100%, let's say, honest in that way, overly blunt is never a good way of elaborating yourself and also your answers. Okay, so a third way, or a third objective in our class, overall speaking, is to understand how to properly, let's say, promote, okay, quote unquote, the image of your own. So we'll talk about, what does this mean? And in a way that we so far, have already talked quite a lot of things, in our class, and we understand things that should never be done is to pre-you. So something that I want to talk about, so far, before we have the next and the rest of us do the turn and talk about our answers. So first of all, things that I want to talk a little bit about is whether or not we expose what things that we're not good at to people in the interview. Do we bring that up by ourselves? William?
You do, kind of. Like, you have to bring up some. You don't want to picture yourself as a perfect kid,
Yes.
because no one's really perfect. They want to know what you're good at and what you're bad at.
Yes, all right. And something else that, yes, Kevin, is there something else that you want to add on to it?
I think that every time you bring up something that you are not necessarily good at or you're imperfect, I think you should try to justify why that is, and also what actions have you taken to improve on that area.
Very well said. Okay, so this is the case where things are getting a little bit strategic now, So we need to think about I'm just going to put down as reminders. Okay, so number one is not to say that everyone is perfect. Of course, it's not, and people will have this sort of imperfections. But to mention that or to strategically bring it up is going to show that, first of all, you're very honest, about your situation, and number two, you are not afraid of being, let's say, exposed in this way to show your weaknesses. So we're not to try to say that you're actively showing your weaknesses to everybody. That wouldn't be wise to do. However, whenever you come across, this situation that it's either being asked, so sometimes the administrators or the interviewers will probably ask you questions like, can you identify some of your weaknesses and strengths, So those questions would pop up occasionally from time to time. However, how do we do it, strategically? Number one, okay? So strategically, switch, okay, your weaknesses or things that you're not potentially good at doing, into potential strengths. So how are we doing it? Number one, probably I'm a little bit frustrated so far in terms of procrastination. So I plan to do something, just hypothetically speaking, but I never get myself ahead of the schedule, However, now since I'm very aware of this issue as well as its potential consequences, I am actively trying to make executions on my plans in trying to make myself become more diligent in doing things. So there's a little switch that you're making. Is everybody following? So some reminders that we need to put here is that you never just talk about your weaknesses and just leave them there hanging, all right? To overall speaking, we said that your self-introduction at the very beginning should never go too long or become too informative that you mention everything that you prepared. Why? For example, you mention your hobbies in your introduction. You mention what you do in your spare time. You mention, your weaknesses sometimes, But the thing that we said is already do not actively show that. And once you come across with that, make sure that you turn it into potential strengths. But what would happen if you've already mentioned everything or so many things, okay, into your introduction? What would happen?
The first thing that would happen is that later on, the interviewer might not have a lot of questions to ask you because you've already said everything. And the second thing that would happen is the interviewer might get lost in all this information and proceed to lose some of that information because there's so much of it.
Yeah, there's so much of it. And another thing, right? Well, because you've mentioned this much, right, into your introduction, you probably would get cut off, or you probably wouldn't have to, let's say, get to the finish point that you desired, but this is already too much and too informative for, right, whoever the interviewer is or your administrator to process. So slow it down when you have to, and you're recommended to do it. So more strategically plan to make your self-introduction become something that will actually be strong, right, impressive, and leave a strong impression with your interviewers. Okay? So for example, right, this weakness part, once again, when do we mention, or in terms of the question, there's actually one potential question that probably will get you into talking about your weaknesses proactively. For example, I asked that question, right, to one of us here at the beginning of class, something like, what do you want to change about yourself? If you are able to change something about yourself, what would it be? Right? So thinking about this question now, that will become one of the things that you could slightly mention or get to talk about this strategic switch. Are we following so far, everyone? Okay, so they'll sometimes always talk about, well, this is what you've done already, and if you have another chance of doing something, are you going to do it differently? So they always wanted to see whether you've absorbed something from your previous experience and how are you making things better for yourself or more advantages for yourself for future opportunities out there. Okay, so remember or mark this question down, right? If there's anything that you would like to change about yourself, what would it be? They might frame this question in different ways, but, right, otherwise, try not to proactively open yourself up and then just show your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, the things that you're not good at to your administrators. Are we good? Even if we mention it, we're being very strategic about it, okay? We're not trying to make ourselves like that weak, or it's kind of like a lot of kind of weaknesses attached. Those are, it matters a lot to your overall image, once again, that we're trying to build. So since we're here, right, talking about the overall image, right, we need to make sure that our interview is concise. That is something that is very important, right? So why would, let's say, having too much information not good is because people will get lost, right? So if you are able to reduce yourself or reduce the personality that you want your examiner or you want your administrator to know, we'd recommend just 3 words, right, that people can think about, okay? And we'll talk about them with examples later on. So try to make your overall image become concise, right, impressive, right, and let's say concrete. So this is something that would spike for interest, okay, that's going to open up more conversations or more possibilities of how the conversation is going to get conducted. This is all important. All right, so I'm just going to let's say propose one word. If I'm saying that in response to this question, how am I going to introduce myself in brief, right? If I say I'm a very hardworking person, is that a necessarily good choice of a word? If in total, right, we're now saying we want to reduce everything to 3 key words. Is hardworking going to be good enough to be one of them?
That hardworking wouldn't necessarily be a strong word. You can always substitute it with a stronger synonym, such as diligent.
Is diligent like that much better than hardworking? So we are trying to come up with something that is, first of all, strong, right? And it fits yourself, first of all, and interesting in a way that people would naturally want to hear more. So for example, if I'm, instead of saying I'm hardworking, right, or I'm diligent, or I'm just a very, sincere person, instead, if I try to switch that tone and say something like, I'm a person that always strives for excellence because, and then it goes on, right? But this phrase that you're coming up with, or this keyword that you're coming up with, is revealing your core values, or let's say one of your core values, which is competitive. Are we following so far, everyone? So try to show a little bit of where you want this word to carry you with, or how far do you expect this word to give you, right? Once again, the goal is to make it impressive. So you don't want to spend 2.5 minutes talking about something, right? Everything that happened in your life so far. We've already said that we don't include everything, right? We need to be very selective. And quite frankly, we mentioned those 3 keywords. Okay, and what those 3 keywords will be, that is individual varying. That's really varying according to who you are, right? What kind of person you are, and what are some core qualities that you currently possess. Okay, and with each keyword, do you just mention it, or is there something that goes after it? What do we think?
One thing that you can do is provide an anecdote for each of those personality traits.
Very good. Okay, so attach anecdote, right? Or let's say a mini story, okay? But in this case, this mini story needs to be, first of all, truthful, okay? You can't make up just something just to look yourself a little bit better, or just make yourself look a bit stronger or more competitive. It won't work out in this way, so we must be very careful for those, okay? So that would be something that I hope, right, people would come back home, right, and think a little bit about what your 3 keywords would be. And your anecdotes could be anything from something that you did before that gave you a certain sense either of accomplishment, or you've accomplished something before, you've competed with maybe a team or a group or any competition that you've attended. But once again, we must make sure those anecdote or mini story reveal or they prove your 3 words in a sense.